what's going on, and welcome to Designer Head Podcast. My name is Jan, and I will be your host. This is a podcast where I will be talking about technology, design, intersection between design and technology, and basically using this platform as my brain dump. If you like it, awesome. I really would love for you to follow me and follow my episodes and spread the word. If you don't, well, I'm sorry, but actually I'm not. My podcast, and I'll do with it whatever the hell I want. And so, without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of Designer Head. This episode is brought to you by, I'm just messing with you. I don't have any sponsors, so I don't have to answer to anyone. Well, yeah, no, I don't have to answer to anyone. All right, so today is a special one. Why is it a special one? Is because it's touching me to my core. And I'm passionate about a lot of things, but this one is specifically sometimes frustrating, sometimes annoying, sometimes making me angry. Yes, I do get angry. I'm a nice guy, but I do get angry sometimes. Anyhow, today's episode is going to be about hiring right designers. So here's the thing. Over the last decade, I've been working with a lot of different companies as a IC or manager, leader, it doesn't really matter. And I have been helping other companies outside of that, advising, mentoring, coaching. What I noticed is almost not a trend per se, but it seems like a lot of companies, and this is directed to startups, mostly early to mid-stage startups. So what I'm talking about is typically startups like to hire people that they think are quote-unquote rock stars. So they try to get the best they can get for the money they can spend. A lot of the founders in the tech industry typically are almost, what's the right word? Starstruck by engineers or product leadership or product managers or designers or any kind of field or expertise that comes from the big tech companies such as Google's and Facebook's or Meta's, Instagram, WhatsApp. What happens in these situations? They typically try to recruit people from all of these big tech companies thinking that we're going to hire this incredibly successful, very talented, highly sought after, incredibly highly paid person. And I'm going to be talking about designers. That will be absolutely magical for what we need because this person obviously can solve all of our problems. They can design amazing shit. They can figure out what our users need in an instant. And they're basically a unicorn shooting rainbow out of their asses. At the same time, the one thing they don't realize is that when you hire people that are incredibly successful in a very supportive and wealthy environment, such as a Google or a Meta or Apple or any other big tech company, when you pluck them out of that environment and you drop them into an environment that does not have enough money, doesn't have the budget, doesn't have the resources, team, support mechanism, and everything else for them to be successful, they will not be successful. Granted, there are some people that will, but in the majority of the cases, they will not. And they don't. For many reasons, not because they're not talented, not because they're bad designers, but just because they do not have the support mechanism or the supporting environment. They're coming from a very large corporation. They're accustomed to a very specific process. They're accustomed to doing things in a very specific way and having almost endless budgets to accomplish whatever they set out to accomplish. When you enter a early stage startup that just raised their seed round at maybe $3 or $5 million, I assure you they do not have endless budgets. If anything, you're running on a shoestring budget trying to make shit out of nothing and figure out how to do anything with incredibly low budget or no budget at all and without the arsenal of tools that you typically would have at any of these big companies. So, why am I saying all these things? Why am I sounding so annoyed or frustrated with this kind of approach? Because at the end of the day, what is happening is, in these instances, founders who don't necessarily understand design or design practices when they hire these ultimately unicorns with amazing experience and holy shit, they were working at Google, suddenly find themselves in a situation where they have to pay this person more than they can afford, give them more equity than they ever wanted to, and not get what they're asked for, or what they bargained for, or what they need. That's a more important conversation here. And they get disappointed. And so after a while, obviously, they will lay the person off. That's going to be a sour experience for both sides. The founders will feel that, well, shit, we got scammed. The person that left a very cushiony, very comfortable, and very nice job at Google to go and build and work on this startup suddenly feels cheated. Feels that he was taken for a ride. Feels like, hey, these guys convinced me to quit my amazing job that paid me almost $500,000 a year to go join them for $200K a year. And they basically pitched this, we're in this together and we're all building this as a family. And at the end of the day, sorry, it's not going to work out. And so the person is being left out feeling that the startup industry is just crap. And that's why they don't want to work in this anymore. And they go back to their cushiony jobs. In many cases, they don't want to quit again or leave again. And so it creates this almost a endless loop of disappointment, annoyances, and just sour taste in your mouth on both ends. Because a lot of the people, a lot of the founders that start companies and don't necessarily understand or know design or design practices feel or think that I want to hire only the best people. Not understanding that sometimes the best people are not the right people for you or for your startup. Not because they're bad, not because your startup is bad. It's a misfit of an environment or a situation. You can't take an executive that used to run, I don't know, Bank of America and suddenly put them in an early stage startup to run a startup. Odds are they'll fail. Not because they're bad executives. It's just because they're not used to a very scrappy, incredibly fast-moving environment where there is no rules, there is no process, there is no who's reporting to whom. It's basically a bunch of people building something incredible together, and they're just running. Like, they're not even in a marathon. They're in a sprint to the next stage, whatever that stage is, either launching the product or getting more users, getting the next round of funding, whatever that might be. There is a next milestone that they need to hit, and they don't necessarily, in many cases, see or think or even consider the milestone right after that. Because in the startup environment, you have to hit the next milestone in order to hit or achieve whatever you set out to achieve in order to either please your board or get the next round of funding or please your users or your customers so they don't walk away. As somebody who's been building products in early to mid-stage startups over the last decade, I can tell you that I saw firsthand how people from big tech companies do not survive in these startups. Like, literally do not last. Not because they don't know what they're doing. They just don't have the place, the environment, the support, and the budgets, and the runway, and the team, and the resources. They don't have all of the tools to be successful. So this message is, or this specific episode is for founders and designers that work at big tech companies. If you're a designer working at a big tech company and you're getting approached by a founder or founders of an early stage startup, here's a few things, or actually more than a few things, that you probably should consider before you saying, yes, I'll join you. You need to know that there is no guarantee that you'll stay with the startup for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Why? Because if the startup raised their first round of funding, which probably either odds are it is a seed, because typically people don't hire anyone at a pre-seed level. So they probably raised the seed round, let's say around between $3 to $5 million. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. Because if you consider that they're building a team and they need probably anywhere between 5 to 10 people to launch a product. So this would be, you have the founding team, which could be 1, 2, or 3 people, sometimes 4. And a very rare occasion, you might find 5 or 6. Doesn't really happen, but typically it's like 2 or 3. They have their own salaries. Obviously, as founders, to the best of my knowledge, again, I have never seen salaries of founders that I worked for or worked with, but to the best of my knowledge, they typically do not pull obscene amount of money because the board will be, well, let's put it lightly, upset about it because they're burning through their funding. So they might pull, let's say 150, maybe 200K a year just to, depends where they live, just to pay their bills and have a normal living conditions and not be worried about money and concentrate their effort more on a startup rather than, how do I make ends meet? So if you have 3 founders and each one of them is pulling, let's put it to the lowest end of $150,000 a year. That's already $450,000 a year out of your budget of a $3 million capital that they just raised. In addition to that, they're going to hire other people. To hire other people, they will need to pay them, again, anywhere between $120,000 to potentially $200,000 a year. So if you take into consideration all of these people they're going to hire, and if you talk to the team the first time and you're seeing that you're employee number, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you're being offered a, 160, 170, 180, even $200,000 a year, do the math. Obviously, you can always ask, what's the runway of the company? In many cases, companies or founders will share that information and say, well, we have a runway for, 12, 13, 14, 16, 18 months or 24 months, and then we're going to go for the next round. Now, in that situation, when you're assessing this specific startup, you're seeing that if they raised, again, we're anchoring this conversation around 3 million seed because that's almost like a typical one that I at least saw in the industry over the last decade. So let's anchor around $3 million. So you're entering this engagement and they're giving you $200,000 a year salary. Why? Because you're coming from Google, and odds are if you are mid to senior level designer, your salary was probably around 200K anyway, plus the bonuses, plus stock, plus benefits, total comp maybe 350, bordering 400, right? I might be right, I might be wrong, but from my experience and my knowledge, I think I'm kind of right. But anyway, the point being is when you're entering that startup at $3 million funding, it'll give you, again, let's say they try to match you from Google, so it's $200,000 a year. You're not going to get any bonuses. You're probably not going to get any stock. You're going to get equity options, which means they will convert into stock if the company exits or goes through an IPO. But up until then, this equity thing that they give you, it doesn't mean anything. It's not worth really anything. You got 200. The only thing that's actually worth anything, and that's in the current situation that you're in, is the cash you're getting as your salary. Maybe some perks. Maybe a work from home stipend. Maybe, I don't know, you'll get a tiny bonus or something at the end of the year if the company does well or meets whatever million other conditions. But let's concentrate only on $200,000 a year of your salary. Now, you have to keep in mind, for those of you who don't know how salaries work, when a company gives you an offer for $200,000, that's not what the company is actually paying. You will cost the company somewhere closer to probably $260,000 to $180,000. Why? Because taxes and some other shit that they need to pay as a business when they pay your salary. So in a nutshell, anyone who makes $150,000 a year in a company, probably the company pays, it costs to the company around $180,000 to $190,000. If you're doing 200, then you cost the company around $250,000 or thereabouts. So if you think about it in that kind of simple math, right? If you have 10 people in the company and let's do a average of everyone is getting, obviously someone's going to get 150, somebody's going to get 200, somebody's going to get 120, somebody's going to get 250. But let's kind of equalize everything and put everything on an average of $150,000. So if you have 10 people at $150,000, which means it costs the company closer to 200, and that's 10 people, we're at what? 2 million? Only salaries already ate basically 80%. The company is burning within the first 12 months of receiving their funding almost $2 million only on people, just the salaries. If they got $3 million, that means they do not have 24 months of runway. That means that they have, at best, 18 months of runway. That means that the founders need to start fundraising somewhere at the mark of 6 to 7 months into the seed round. So they raise their funding, and about half a year to 8 months, they're going to start the next round and hope to God to raise it in time before they run out of money to keep covering the salaries and keep growing. But outside of that, this is a risk that anyone who makes a decision to join an early stage startup has to make. And I'm trying to help people to make this more rational. Now, the next part here is you also have to understand that they do not have, because of all these expenses of a salary, maybe an office. So hopefully they're fully remote and they don't have the overhead of the office. But some companies do have the office. So it's another addition of a cost on a monthly basis that eats into their runway. Because of the salaries, because of a potential office, and other things that they need to pay for, such as your computers, the equipment, the million different SaaS products, email accounts, Slack accounts, Jira accounts, and everything else, you have to remember each account costs money, and it costs per user, per seat, per month. Doesn't sound like a lot when you think about it, when it's like $20, $30, $50 here and there, but when you put it all together, it actually adds up to thousands of dollars a month being spent only in running. Like, that's it. Just existing, if you will, and doing your job. So in that situation, you will not have the budgets that you're used to. You will not have a research budget as you used to. You will not have the budget to go and get whatever tools that you fancy to get. And the list goes on. Like, there's so many things that now you will not have option to be successful. So you have to find other ways how to succeed in this situation. I'm not saying that you cannot be successful. I have been for many years, but I think the difference is that I have never worked in a large corporation, so I have no idea what it's like. I mean, I do have an idea, but I personally have never experienced or utilized large budgets. So I learned on the job, at my first job at a startup, quickly how to basically make unicorns out of a thin air, how to run a design function on a shoestring budget of maybe a few $1,000s a month. Or what I've learned later on in my career is how to put together an entire UX research powerhouse on a shoestring budget of $35,000 a year, and still manage to do a lot of research, ethnographic research, user testing, usability studies, user interviews, and the list goes on of the things I was able to do on these incredibly shoestring budgets. But that just means that what it does is that you have to become incredibly creative of how do you do things in order to achieve similar, identical, or even higher or better results that you would get when you work at a large corporation with a lot bigger budgets. So if this is not something for you, if this is not something that you're comfortable with, if you know that in order for you to be successful, you need to have your tools that you're used to, you need to have your budgets that you're used to, you need to have a support organization or mechanism around you to be successful that you're used to, then you have to think really, really hard if this startup life is for you or not. Because you might get disappointed. You might get burnt. You might enter with this ideological view of we're building something incredible and we're solving some amazing problem. But if you feel as a creative or as a designer that you're failing because you just don't have the tools and resources that you're used to and you need, then at the end of the day, the product is going to suffer and the company is going to suffer, and odds are either you're going to quit or are they going to let you go? It's just simple as that. What I'm trying to communicate here, working at startups and building incredible things out of thin air is absolutely fucking amazing. One of the best parts about startups that I love and have been doing for the last decade is the fact that you get to build something that no one ever built before. You get to work on something completely innovative in an incredibly short period of time that if you try to do this at Google, it will take you fucking years. If you'll get the permission for. Here, you don't need to ask for permission. In startups, you're expected to be independent, self-sufficient, and do shit the way you see fit that will meet the goals and needs and desires of the total organization. Yes, working at startups is absolutely amazing. I love it, have loved it, still love it, and will love it for the rest of my life. But for those of you who've never done that before and you spent 5, 6, 7, 10 or more years in a large corporation working at Googles and Facebooks and Apples and Amazons and Microsofts and so forth. So yeah, you really need to think if this is something you want to do or not. Again, I would encourage anyone who wants to go and work at a startup and think this is an incredible idea or you got approached with interesting idea to work on with a startup, absolutely go explore if you want to. Just fair warning that it might not be what you have expected. And so you need to make sure to ask all the questions that you need to ask of the founders to make sure this is something for you or not. And honestly, the questions you should ask are A, how much funding do they raise? B, when do they expect go for the next round? C, what is their runway? What is their expectation of runway? What is the team size? Things like, what is the support mechanism? So if you are joining them, they understand that they're going to have to give you some sort of a budget to do your job, to get things like your tools that you need outside of just Figma, right? Because if you're a single designer in your organization and you're probably going to be expected to do some research, then you probably need some tools like, I don't know, Listna or user interviews or user testing or whatever, right? Or Maze, doesn't matter. Like there are tools that you will need in order to do your job properly. In addition to all of that, if you're going to be interviewing people and so forth, you're going to have to pay them. So that's not a budget that you're probably going to have. And you probably need to be explicit about it with the founders that apart from paying you the salary, hiring a designer into organization comes with a specific portion of obligation, financial obligation, which means you need to have some sort of a budget to do your job. What that budget is, I can't tell you. I mean, I could. I would say $35,000 a year is a pretty good number. You can be very creative with how you use it and actually achieve great outcomes and results with that. However, it's up to you and up to the company and what you think the budget could be or should be and what you feel comfortable with. So these are the things you have to ask if the company or founders are ready to foot the bill. So that's my advice to you. Again, you do what you want to do. Make the decision that is best suited for you and your situation and your future goals and everything else. Now, I would like to switch to the founders. The next portion of this conversation is addressing a problem that a lot of founders typically have. Always trying to hire the rock stars of the world without realizing that they're going to have to A, pay them a shit ton of money, which is going to eat into their runway. B, provide them with enough of a budget for them to actually be successful. And C, make sure they have enough of a support organization and mechanism around them to be successful. So let's say you're a founder, you raised $3 million, everything is great, somebody believed in you, gave you a check, and you're running, and it's incredible, and it's amazing. You have the money to go and do what you need to do. Now, what is happening is you're actually gonna burn through your runway because you want to hire people that are not really suited for your company. One of the things that honestly I truly align and agree with Y Combinator's approach is do not hire people from big tech companies, because as an early stage startup, you don't possess enough of an organization, the mechanism, the platform, the budgets, and everything else to make them or have them be successful and be at their best as they were at all of these big tech companies. While you absolutely can go and hire the best people you can possibly find, you need to be realistic about the fact that if you do so, you need to pay them equivalent or close to what they're getting paid at Google. And if you're somebody who never worked at companies like Google, you can easily find total compensations and how they evaluate talent and what they pay them and what it means and what it includes and whatnot. But in a simple terms, a Google employee probably going to be getting a total compensation of anywhere between $350,000 to $500,000. It doesn't mean they're getting cash. Cash, they're probably getting $250, maybe closer to $300. But then they have incentives and stock options and stocks and bonuses, structures, and the list goes on, which eventually comes close to total comp evaluation of about $500,000 or slightly less than that, depending on their experience, the team they're working on, the location, and so forth. But time and time again, I keep seeing a lot of founders who are inexperienced, They go out and they hire people that are completely misaligned or not the right fit for their teams or for their companies or for the stage they're at. So as an example, when you're seed stage startup and you just raised your $3 million seed round, you do not need, and I repeat this again, you do not need an executive on the design team. You don't have a design team. You probably want to make your first design hire. And the best approach is to really sit down, evaluate what exactly you need for the next 12 to 15 to 16 months. If you need somebody to simply make shit pretty and take your MVP and turn it into a functionally usable product, you do not need a lead UX designer or a lead product designer. You do not need a head of design or a VP of design or director of design. You don't need any of these people because these people will come with a hefty price tag and will expect to build a team and expect to be not the only person in the company for the next year or two. All you need in this stage or this situation, you probably need just a mid-level product designer or UX designer, but probably more product designer because they're more visual than UX designers. And so at this stage, what you really need is a mid-level product designer that will be absolutely excited to work with you. Try to find somebody who has some previous startup experience. Do not go out and try to snatch people from all these big tech companies. Again, they come with very different expectations of a work environment, which probably you do not possess unless you raised $50 million as your seed round. But if you're operating in a $3 million quote unquote budget or runway, then you have to be conservative with your money and you have to be conservative of who you hire and what they should be doing and for how long. If you are looking to hire a designer, your first designer, I would highly recommend looking at a mid-level product designer with probably anywhere between 3 to 5 years of experience and at least 1 or 2 startups behind them. So they know what it is and they know what it's like. In addition, what you need to understand is how do designers operate? It's not only hiring a designer, giving them a nice MacBook and getting them a Figma license and you're done. You're not. For a designer to be successful, they need other tools. They need research platforms. They need usability testing platforms. They need user interview platforms. All of these different tools cost other money. Outside of just having licenses for these tools and operating and using them on a monthly basis, if you're product designer or designer interviewing other people to figure out if the product fit is good or people are happy or satisfied or whatnot, they have to pay these people. That's how it works. In order for them to be successful, they need to talk to your customers or your users. Your users do not do this for free. Some do, but in many cases, especially when you're in the period of product market fit and you're trying to figure out and discover who's actually your user or your customer, even though you might have an idea, but you probably still don't fully understand or know, and you're trying to figure this out, this is the time when your designer is going to be talking to honestly random people. And these random people will expect to be compensated. The compensation can run anywhere between $50 to $100 per session. So if you're interviewing 10 people every month, that's $1,000 going only to people's compensation. You need to take this into account. You need to be aware of that. So your designer, outside of their immediate salary, probably going to need a budget. My recommendation, put aside at least $30,000 for the year and allow your designer to do their job. Give them that budget. So once again, you might want to hire the best people you think you're hiring, but at the same time, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because if you're hiring the wrong designers for your specific needs in this specific moment of your stage or of your company, you're just going to burn money and not going to get your money's worth outcome. So hiring correctly will be a lot more beneficial than having the bragging rights that your designer just came from Google. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is building a product that your customers love. For that, you need to find the right designer. And finding the right designer starts with understanding the core needs. What are the needs of the product? What are the needs of the company? Where do you see this product to be in the next 12 to 16 to 18 months? What do you want to achieve with your product? What does your designer needs to possess, have, or know to be successful with your product? And that's okay if you don't know. That's absolutely fine. Literally 90% of startup founders do not know fully what designers do and do not understand fully the design process. And that's okay. that's not needed for you, and that's fine. I don't understand how engineering works, engineering process fully. I mean, I've been working with engineers for a long time, but still, I'm not an engineer. Never have been. I've never run an engineering team, never have been. So I do not try to think that I know things about teams that I have nothing to do with, or I do not understand fully or grasp fully how they operate. For that, my high recommendation is if you truly want to hire the right people for your company and your stage, here is my genuine advice to you. As a founder, I think the first thing you need to do when you made a decision that you need a designer in your company is before you hire a designer, or even before you talk to a recruiter, go and find fractional directors of design. Go and find fractional heads of design. Go and find design advisors to startups. Because we are, and I'm one of those design leaders that advise other startups on these specific situations. Talk to me, talk to other people, it doesn't matter, but find the person who will be able to walk in, understand your startup, understand your technology, understand where you're going, understand your vision, and then give you an accurate estimation of what kind of designer do you need at this stage right now, how much they might cost you, where to find them, how to evaluate their talents, and so forth. And maybe even help you hire and recruit these people with interview processes and so forth. But that way, you will ensure that you're not going to waste a year's worth of somebody's salary on somebody that will not be a good fit on both sides. Because if they're not a good fit for you, you're not going to be happy. They're not going to be happy. Unhappy designers produce crap outcomes, not because they're crap designers, just because they're unhappy and they lose interest and they don't care. So find the right people for your needs that will propel your company and your startup forward. Keep that in mind. Remember that. Founders, if you have questions, I'm around to answer those questions. If you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. You can ask me. I'll recommend somebody else to talk to. But do make these decisions before you go out and rush in and hire people that will not work out for your company. Hope this was helpful. Thank you all. I'll see you next time, or I hear you next time. I'll talk to you next time. And here we are at the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening and spending that time with me on this episode. Now, I do want to mention that everything that has been said, it is my opinion and my opinion only. It does not represent any companies, entities, persons, and whatnot that I have worked with before, currently, or in the future. It's only my opinions. Once again, I want to thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing or hearing or talking to all of you in the future. If you have any questions or you want me to cover any specific topic or any specific subject, please find me on LinkedIn, reach out, send me a message. And I would really appreciate to get some sort of a review or feedback of how you like this podcast or this specific episode. If there is anything you don't like, you like, please just share with me so I can learn and make this experience a lot better, because this is a project for me. And so, thank you once again. And on that note, never stop learning, and I'll see you all next time.